When you first set eyes on the Dreadnought, it's easy to get sucked into the whole high pivot idler design. And while that's part of Forbidden's USP, there's a lot more going on with this bike than initially meets the eye. So first, let's talk geometry. The Dreadnought comes in 4 frame sizes, small to XL. So nothing out of the ordinary there. It's at the back end of the bike where things get interesting. By adjusting the horizontal position of the pivots relative to the bottom brackets, Forbidden delivers size-specific chainstay lengths with one single swing arm. That's something Owen Pemberton, the man behind Forbidden, first introduced at Norco, and now we're seeing it pop up everywhere. The difference here, however, is that it's not just a couple of millimeters separating frame sizes. It's 14 mil per size. So the chainstay length is size specific and proportional. They're also bloody long. And thanks to the 100% rearward axle path, at sag, it extends to 463 millimeters. Now, I like long chainstays, but I initially thought about riding the medium just to reel it in a bit. So I rode the medium and the large back to back, and while both bikes had quite similar weight distribution, I just found that the large fitted me better. And that's the real beauty of genuinely proportional geometry. Next on my hit list, Antirise. In simple terms, it's how much the suspension resists extension under braking. So the Dreadnought has over 100% anti-rise, which is pretty much double what most other designs have. And it's intentional, and you notice it. Riding the Dreadnought back to back with other bikes over the past year, it's a trait I've really come to like. It keeps the bike more balanced so I don't have to move my weight around as much to maintain traction. Because the shock's sitting deeper into its travel under braking, there is more force needed to move it, so it's not quite as sensitive. But if we flip that argument around, if you ride a bike with low anti-rise, you get more load transfer into the fork, so the fork is in that situation. So one approach is not necessarily better than the other, which leads us nicely onto the suspension. When I asked Owen Pemberton if there's anything he changed his mind about regarding suspension in recent years, he said it was the shift from a constant progressive rate to a variable one. That shift resulted in the rate control linkage. So you have a little bit of progression at the beginning, and then the rate is quite smooth through the mid-stroke, and it's at the end stroke where the ramp up really kicks in. And it's the combination of that ramp up and the bottom out bumper in the Fox Float X2 shock that makes it pretty hard to get the full 154 mil travel out of the Dreadnought. So would it be even better with a coil shock? Of course it would. So I've skirted around the elephant in the room for long enough. Let's discuss the idler. First up, it does not eliminate pedal kickback. Reduce it, yes, but the Dreadnought still retains some chain growth just so it's got some snap when you stand up to sprint. The lower chain guide definitely adds some resistance though, but I feel it's more acceptable on a bike like the Dreadnought than the shorter travel Druid. And let's face it, tire compounds, tire casings make a way bigger difference to resistance than the idler and the chain guide do to the drivetrain. That said, all things being equal, there are energy losses across the drivetrain. But I think it's a small price to pay, given how composed the Dreadnought feels when you're charging hard on rough terrain. And that's exactly what it's been designed to do. The neutral riding position with rider centered means that the bike feels very composed, which in turn saves energy when it matters most. It's still a surprisingly agile bike though, even with its extended footprint. And in a world where you can pretty much tell how most bikes are going to ride based on the numbers alone, it's refreshing to ride a bike that's genuinely blazing its own trail. To read my full review on the Dreadnought and the Druid, head over to mbr.co.uk. There, you'll also find an in-depth interview with Owen Pemberton, the man behind Forbidden Bikes.